Welcome to Living Legacy Leadership, where we explore, discover, and share insights, tools, and strategies for a life well lived into elderhood. I'm your host, Donna Kim Brandt, author, speaker, legacy strategy coach, and creator of the concept Living Legacy, where you choose to live life on your own terms while contributing to people, places, and projects along your life journey. I believe that the life you live is the legacy you leave. Now, the guests I bring to you each week all address some unique aspect of learning, leadership, or legacy. This helps you raise your own game as a leader in business and life, and also showcases some extraordinary people who exemplify living legacy leadership. At least once a month, I also offer a training session to skill you in game-changer thinking for your own application. So get your notebook ready or sharpen your memory by tuning in your attention, and we'll dive right in. Well, we have landed a big one today, folks. I am very honored to bring to you Mr. Peter Power. He's one of the UK's leading practitioners in organizational resilience and crisis management, and he's an author of the current British Standard on Crisis Management, definitely a leader for extraordinary times. Now, he comes with a background in British policing and anti-terrorism, and he was a key architect of the original gold, silver, bronze command structure and has since gone on to be chairman of the World Conference on Disaster Management, and he advises several international organizations. He has an amazing and incredible, considerable frontline experience in many real crises, and because of that, he's frequently invited to the BBC to comment on the actions at the scene of several previous major incidences. He's also been a big support and advisor to the British, Australian, and Canadian governments in planning for conflict management situations. He's a fellow of the Institutes of Risk Management, Business Continuity, and Chartered Management, and he's a magistrate. And currently, he is leading the organizational resilience capability at Concerto Consulting Group based out of London. So welcome, Peter.
Hi, Donna. Very nice to speak to you.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to have you here. Peter, before we jump in, just give us a sense of the current situation in the UK with the coronavirus pandemic. You know, given that you come from a crisis management perspective, just sort of set the scene for what's going on there in England right now.
Well, you have to remember that all crises go through three phases: mayhem, mastermind, and manhunt. The mayhem is utter confusion. The mastermind is, crikey, who can we turn to tell us how to get out of this mess? And the manhunt is, right, who are we going to blame? Now, right now, we're in this situation where we're moving into the last phase of manhunt. And scientists are now complaining a bit that the politicians are just blaming them, i.e. the scientists, when things don't go according to plan. The scientists are saying, oh, look here, politicians, you make the decisions. We just give you our frank opinion on these things. So we're facing a situation where the mortality rate has gone down a great deal, but it's still, in terms of 100,000 people in population, about the fifth in the world. So the actual death rate is very high. That's probably just behind America or somewhere behind it anyway. The feeling is now people are getting a bit frustrated, as they are in the States, about being locked down. And despite drinking endless cups of tea and stroking dogs and cats and talking about jigsaw puzzles and gardens and whatever, the truth of it is a lot of people don't live like that. They want to get out and about. And for many, many people, and particularly women, being at home is in the least safe environment that they can imagine. Statistically, about once every working day of the week, a woman dies in a scenario involving domestic violence. Now, this gets into my other role as a magistrate, and it really does concern me. So we've got the impact of what's happening now. Courts aren't hearing cases, and the NHS is doing a very good job, our health service. But we still don't know the cause. We haven't got a vaccine yet, and testing isn't working properly. And then the next phase, after the impact, are the consequences. The consequences are vast and economic. We're in a downturn, a serious depression. And some people even now are saying, in a societal sense, is the medicine actually more painful than a disease it's designed to stop? Now, that's a cynical view, and it's one I don't agree with. But I have the comparative luxury of living in a nice part of the UK where people flock to come to get exercise. But it hasn't got over yet, and I think possibly The worst is yet to come, certainly in an economic sense.
Wow, I'm shivering just to listen to you with all of that. It's really amazing. I know you've said as well in some of the papers I've had the honor of reading from you that 90% of most catastrophes happen to be quiet, kind of like that domestic violence and I suspect even child abuse that's going on now. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, you've got essentially two types of crisis. Things that really hit you with a thump. For example, a catastrophic computer outage, some major event that may be hostile in nature, like a significant terrorist act, or something like volcanic ash from Iceland suddenly appearing on the radar screen and all of a sudden there are no flights. These are the ones that happen sort of quite abruptly. There's some planning even for solar flares from the sun that might disrupt a great deal of our digital dependency. The quiet ones are the ones that appear by stealth, and these often come around. And actually, COVID-19 is a quiet one. The alarm bell's ringing if people care to look. Last year in China, but then it's easier not to look. And I certainly, in the beginning of the year, found myself buying some face masks, for example. A modest amount for myself and my wife and my two sons. A very small amount. I got them from a hardware shop because I'm sort of a rather boring, prescient person. I thought, I wonder where this is going. But eventually, people started to wake up. They woke up eventually that China wasn't behaving itself. When they did wake up, they didn't do too badly, but all their efforts to begin with was trying to gag the doctor who was saying this is going to be a global pandemic. So that's a stealth one. So these things creep up slowly, and then they accelerate. And then there comes a point in many crises where fear exceeds reality. For many, many weeks, unique in my experience, this was the reverse. Reality was exceeding fear. But now we all know that fear is there. We all know that it's not unrealistic. And that's the concern. So I still think very much that most crises are stealth. They're slow in their gestation. And very often they appear because the original incident, the trigger incident, which became apparent, was badly handled. And COVID-19 is a classic case. So but people don't have the wherewithal, the confidence, the clout to actually stop these things when the early signals appear. They tend to wait, and they wait until it's too late, in which case the decision point is passed and things can only get worse. And that's really what's happening now.
I know, having been married for a long time to a policeman, that a lot of times crises are designed out ahead of time because of good reconnaissance, or like the work you used to do or maybe still do in anti-terrorism. And the public is none the wiser, so that when a crisis actually does occur, or you say don't do this because something might have or could have happened, they tend not to believe you. Do you encounter that a lot?
Yes, I do. I have to say that in terms of policing, I left Scotland Yard 30 years ago, and I have nothing whatsoever. I have nothing whatsoever to do with policing now at all, and haven't done for 3 decades. My focus is entirely on crisis management that you alluded to, and prevention. And your point's a good one. What are things happening behind the scenes in some way or another that have actually stopped crises from mushrooming, but the public doesn't actually know it? And certainly in terms of terrorism, that is true. There are many, many attacks that, thanks to some good intelligence from MI6 and MI5, have been thwarted. And sometimes they're thwarted by sending intelligence back down the line to the terrorists to say, we're watching you. Because we just simply can't go around keeping tabs in an open society like America or the UK on people. We don't live in North Korea or China or somewhere like that, where it's an oppressive police state, where people are allowed to go about fairly liberally. On the other issues about stopping things that you simply don't know whether they're going to happen, but aren't necessarily hostile, that's less easy to track. Sometimes crises have ended up not developing into a crisis by accident. A series of activities might have inadvertently taken place which thwarts it. I still fear that the biggest crisis coming will be one of consequence rather than impact, as I said a few minutes ago, as the world suffers a near catastrophic economic downturn as a result of COVID-19. Now, some other crises have stopped their economic simply because of prompt government intervention or simply because of some other reason. So it's very, very hard to actually calculate beyond the world of terrorism which crises have actually been thwarted, inadvertently or not, as a result of some adroit handling at the early stages.
Wow. You probably are familiar with a quote that goes something like this: a mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions.
Yes, I've used it a great deal.
Yeah. So in your line of work now with crisis management within organizations and even governments, what's the role of hypothetical scenario planning? Do you the balance between what is possible versus what's probable, a la Sherlock Holmes even?
It's all part of risk management. Indeed, I've been working on a case today which has got three aspects to it. And this would lead to a scenario exercise. And any decent exercise has got to be based on some realism in terms of the scenario, and what you throw at it, and take, with mock TV news crews and so on. But the three components of that are trying to look at where the crisis might come from. It's what they call horizon scanning. And if you draw a cross on a piece of paper, and on the vertical axis you put something like technical, economic at the top, and at the bottom people, social, and on the horizontal axis you put down internal, external. You then have four quadrants. So if you look at one quadrant, which is external, technical, the threat you might put down there is catastrophic data loss or someone involved in cyber terrorism, whereas inside internal people could be a labor dispute, a boycott, people behaving inappropriately or whatever. Now, when you've done that, you then run them through the next bit, which is to calculate the likelihood of this thing happening and the spread and scope if it does. And you put it on a matrix of 9 squares. Then you get a score or a color, green to red. And then the last one is you say, well, if this happens, what is going to be the impact of it? And then what are the consequences? So you could have an impact which looks tremendous. You've got fire and smoke pouring out of a factory. But actually, when you put that fire out, all it's done is burnt a little bit of it and perhaps a bit of stock. That's it. Nobody hurt. The supply route is going, but it made sensational images for all the TV news crews.
Of course.
That's why you've got to have impact and consequences. And then, and only then, you've got a scenario you can work with. And the exercise is going to do two things. It's either going to discover the gaps so you repair them in your response, or it's going to exercise the people because you've trained them in their roles. And sometimes people who run exercises get rather confused between the two.
Yeah, I imagine. Now, I know, again, in some of your papers, you talk about developing crisis management teams and how important they are in being prepared, basically, for a crisis that either erupts quickly or sneaks up on us, like you've already discussed. Talk about what's involved in a crisis management team, and would that be a unique and distinctive group, or should everybody be skilled to a certain level in crisis management?
No, what I'm trying to avoid in all my training over the years is that your crisis management plans, as well as what they call business continuity plans, which are for operational or foreseeable disruptions, shouldn't end up being in a little glass box on some chief executive's wall with a hammer that says break the glass in an emergency. You really have to get people to think, yep, okay, the lights are coming on, and they look at the corporate radar screen. And if you and I were air traffic controllers watching all these blinking lights as the radar goes round, the lights themselves mean nothing, everything's safe. It's when there's a cluster, when the lights are coming on together, you start to get worried. So in this case, it isn't aircraft